present a detailed and well-researched study of the third verse of Part 3 of Pratamapadesha, Rasayankhand of Rasaratnakara by Sri Nityanak Siddha. Now that we have that formal introduction out of the way, let's actually dive right into what this means. Today, we're going to sequence through the themes, the dialogue, and the really deep explanations of these classical verses, starting with exactly how they lay the groundwork for ancient alchemical amalgamation.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, source text and linguistics. Second, decoding the substances. Third, classical processes. Fourth, textual cross-references. Fifth, a modern scientific review. And finally, the conclusion. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Source text and linguistics, unearthing the syntax of ancient alchemy. Take a look at this historical folio right here. We're examining the verses from the Rasayankhand that detail an incredibly intricate formulation known as the Mrita Sanjivani Gutika. We're focusing specifically on verse 3, which directly builds upon the botanical foundation laid out in verse 2. This is classical alchemical literature at its absolute finest, where the language itself reflects this really sophisticated blending of earthly elements.
Okay, let's break down the Anve, which is basically the logical sequence, and the semantics of this Roman transliteration step by step. First up, the text lists the botanical base: kakatombi, kakamachi, and nirgundi. Then we hit the verb pishtwa, which means having ground, physically instructing the creation of a paste. Tena pralapaspia musha literally translates to by that coating the crucible. Then the syntax deliberately shifts over to the heavy metals in the third verse. We've got paradum for mercury, vyomasattvam for mica, and then these highly specific irons, kantam, tikshnam, and mundakam. The simple English meaning reveals a highly structured sequence. You take specific plants, grind them to coat a vessel, and then introduce a very precise metallic blend.
So if we break down the manufacturing process detailed in the text, we actually see exact classical ratios at play. The explicit instruction is to gather equal parts, a strict 1-to-1 ratio, of the specific botanicals and salts. After you grind them into a protective paste to coat the musha, or the crucible, equal parts of the metals, mercury, mica, and those 3 variations of iron, are introduced into this prepared vessel. The ultimate theoretical goal of this whole amalgamation process was the creation of a highly potent, new amalgamated substance known as the Mrita Sanjivani Gutika. Now, keep in mind, we're strictly looking at the conceptual process here. This isn't a step-by-step DIY preparation method for you to try at home. We're just seeking to deeply understand their historical engineering mindset. Section 2. Decoding the substances, botanicals to heavy metals. You know, this ancient text doesn't really differentiate between plants and metals the way modern chemistry does today. It unifies them into a single alchemical ecosystem. Looking at the botanical base, we have kakatumbi, kakamachi, nirgundi, which is a type of chase tree, kamari or aloe vera, and notably, gunja, the rosary pea, which is actually highly toxic, alongside saintava or rock salt. Historically and philosophically, these specific organics were believed to possess the exact energies required to purify, subdue, and bind the volatile metals during extreme heating. But it absolutely must be stated clearly right now, this pharmacological claim regarding their purifying energies is completely unproven and wholly rejected by modern science.
Now, moving on to the heavy metals detailed in the third verse, we see a remarkably complex metallic profile that really highlights the ancient metallurgical sophistication of the era. First, we have parda, which is mercury. In its classical meaning, parda was considered the absolute pinnacle of all alchemical substances. Then there's vyomasattva, literally translating to the essence of the sky, referring to mica. But what's truly fascinating here is the highly specific categorization of iron into 3 distinct types. Kanta, meaning magnetic iron, tikshna, meaning sharp or cast iron, and munda, referring to ordinary or wrought iron. The historical purpose of blending these precise irons with mercury and mica was a deliberate, calculated attempt to engineer an indestructible amalgam.
Section 3. Classical processes and instruments, Agni and the Musha. So how exactly did they process these intense substances together without any modern laboratory equipment? Well, the Rasaratnakara outlines classical processes known as sanskara, meaning purification or refinement, and maran, which translates to literally killing the metal to strip it of toxicity and theoretically make it biocompatible. They combined equal parts of botanicals, a principle called sama-sam, and created a paste, or pistva. This paste was then used for prolepa, the interior coating of the crucible. This organic and salt paste actually physically protected the crucible from extreme agni, or fire, while theoretically transforming the mercury and iron amalgamation happening inside.
And the absolute star of the show here is the musha. A musha is a classical alchemical crucible, crafted from highly specialized clay and minerals designed specifically to withstand intense thermal shock. But you have to understand, it was much more than just a tool. Historically and philosophically, the musha is deeply symbolic. It represents the cosmic womb. Within this sealed, high-pressure environment, base elements undergo extreme stress and fire to achieve dehasiddhi, which is the historical, albeit completely unproven, claim of absolute bodily perfection and immortality.
Section 4. Textual cross-references, the broader Ayurvedic landscape. Now, you might be wondering, is this the only text talking about this? Not at all. This highly specific amalgamation technique doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's like a giant puzzle. And if we look across the broader historical landscape, we find very similar metallurgical principles in the Rasaranava, specifically in Chapter 7, verses 30 through 35, which focuses heavily on heavy metal processing. For mercury amalgamation techniques, the Rasendra Trudamani, Chapter 4, verse 12, is a direct parallel. And for the foundational knowledge of the plant components, like Nirgundi and Kumari, well, that text traces directly back to the classical medical authorities, the Charaka Samhita, Sutrasthana Chapter 4 for botanical properties, and the Sushruta Samhita, Sutrasthana Chapter 38 for medicinal plant uses. The whole shebang really shows a continuous, evolving tradition of protochemistry. Section 5. Modern Scientific and Clinical Review, Separating Myth from Materials Science. All right, it's time for a reality check. We absolutely must rigorously evaluate these historical beliefs through the uncompromising lens of modern science. On one side, we have the classical beliefs, the idea that parada, or mercury, when properly purified through these elaborate processes, grants dahasiddhi, immortality or absolute health. On the other side, we have modern evidence. Let me be crystal clear. Modern toxicology absolutely does not confirm the safety of ingesting mercury, regardless of any classical claims regarding its purification. Mercury is a severe neurotoxin, and these ancient health claims remain entirely unproven and extremely dangerous to try and replicate. We really have to make a strict distinction between medical advice and historical material science. From a toxicology standpoint, there is extreme risk. Both mercury and the botanical ganja are highly lethal. However, from a metallurgy perspective, this text reveals an advanced ancient understanding of iron alloys. The intentional combination of magnetic, cast, and wrought iron is a real game changer for the era. In the realm of material science, their method of coating crucibles with organic mineral pastes to manipulate these alloys at high temperatures is historically brilliant. It demonstrates an early mastery of bioceramic coatings. For sure, if you're looking into the modern validation of these ancient material sciences, searching Google Scholar keywords like Ayurvedic bioceramics or checking PubMed for toxicological reviews on heavy metal basmas provides some truly fascinating peer-reviewed insights into how modern researchers are analyzing these exact texts today. Section 6. Conclusion and Future Research, the Legacy of Rasaratnakara. So what is our ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into the Rasaratnakara? Historically, this text holds immense significance. It is quite literally a masterclass in ancient protochemical engineering and extreme thermal processing. But we have to draw a hard, clear line between chemical history and modern medicine. The pharmacological claims of ingesting heavy metals are unproven and incredibly dangerous by modern standards. While we completely reject the medical application today, these texts still remain highly significant for understanding the evolution of material science and ancient metallurgy. Which leaves us with one incredibly fascinating question for the future. How can modern nanotechnology safely investigate the unproven nanoscale particle structures created by classical high-heat alchemical basmas? The big question that remains for researchers is whether modern material science can safely study the extreme thermal breakdown of these minerals in a closed, controlled laboratory setting, effectively separating historical myth from potential material science breakthroughs. Thank you so much for joining me on this